Hey guys, I'm Dave Seminara, the Mad Traveler. Thanks for tuning into one of my Florida Man episodes here. We're over at Bach Tower Gardens in Central Florida today. It's a really pretty place with a super interesting backstory. This place is the brainchild of Edward Bach, who was a immigrant. He came here as a little boy from the Netherlands at age 6, and he became a very influential publisher, editor, author, conservationist, and a million other things, and this was sort of his baby. So today we're going to tell you a little bit about this super interesting guy who is painted as sort of a social justice warrior here if you look at the museum of this place. And he was in a way, but he was also a very sort of controversial figure, and this is not addressed here, at least in the museum here or on the official website of Bach Tower Gardens. But he was also a super traditional conservative, and he did not believe in, he was against feminism and women's suffrage, and he's a traditional person who believed that a woman's place was at home and in the family. And so anyways, he's a very sort of controversial figure, and that's not mentioned here at the museum. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but stay tuned. It's going to be a great episode. So I want to give you a little bit more of a quote in what you see. If you look at the Wikipedia page of Bach, of Edward Bach, you'll see there's a section that says opposition to women's rights. And there's a section there that has a quote from him saying that feminism would lead women to divorce, ill health, and even death. And he said that there's no greater enemy of women than woman herself. Yet, when you come here to the museum, I give a quote here for you. It calls Bach an early progressive voice for positive change in all areas of life. And it talks about his environmentalism. Here we go, here's the towers. Well, it portrays him as a social justice warrior, which he was in some elements, particularly with the preservation of Niagara Falls, and he was also an early influential figure in creating the national park system too. So he was a social justice warrior for some causes, but definitely not for feminism. And so he also met Olmsted's father, Frederick Olmsted Sr., because they were both trying to save Niagara Falls. At the time, the late 19th century, Niagara Falls was a complete mess. It was full of industry and factories, and it was really a blight. Of course, Frederick Law Olmsted Sr. created the Niagara Falls park system, and Bach was also part of that movement to save Niagara Falls. So they knew each other from that. And then, of course, so when he hired his son, by the time he hired his son in the early 1920s, his son was really one of the leading architects in the state. So his son, Olmsted Jr., had taken over the building of the Biltmore Estate, for example, in North Carolina. He had done the landscaping at the White House, at the Jefferson Memorial. Had built done all the landscaping at the Washington Zoo. It's beautiful. Do you feel like you're in Florida? I don't. It's a wonderful feeling other than the trees. Some people are quietly meditating and listening. Others are just hammering away. People talking on their cell phones, checking scores. Am I any better? I'm making a YouTube video. Definitely not. See, I swear there are hills in Florida. I'm about to show you that we're on top of one right now. Check this out. I think we're at 298 foot elevation. Which for Florida, this is like Mount Everest right here. There are quite a few people from up north who are here. We're in mass outside, as you can see. It's spring break time. It is March 2022, by the way. And so in any event, where were we? We were talking about the conservation movement and how he met the elder Olmsted. Bach did. Oh, here we go. We've got a bit more. So aside from hearing the beautiful carillon bells here and the tower itself, of course the gardens are beautiful. Bach was a big time birder. At this time of day you don't see many birds, but early in the morning or later you can. And there's also a home here called El Retiro, which is just reopened. You can tour. And it wasn't Bach's home. His home was nearby, but this was the home for a vice president of Bethlehem Steel. Had his house here. You can tour it now. It's a pretty neat place. $23 to get in for adults. Don't come on weekends. It'll be crowded like this. I'm going to tell you that Bach's motto came from his grandmother, by the way, and it's written all over the place here. It's make the world better or make it a little bit more beautiful. And he apparently believed in what he called the gospel of beauty. And he really wanted to create this place as sort of a sanctuary. He thought that the world needed more beauty. And this was he considered this his gift to the American people. He loved the country. He was glad that his parents came here from the Netherlands. He really became a proud American, and this is the gift that he wanted to give people in Florida and anybody else who came to visit. And so, by the way, poor Edward Bach, he died. He had a heart attack and he died less than a year after this place was opened. He had a heart attack in January of 1930. The place was opened, I believe it was in February of 1929, and he's buried at the base of this tower here. So this is where his story came to an end. This is the powder room. I love this. This is the Buck family's powder room as you just step into the door here. in their beautiful Mediterranean state circa 1932. You see these tiles are from Tunisia.
You'll be coming down that stairway.
Yeah.
You can get that when you come down.
Okay, thank you. And the flooring here is from Cuba too. It's the
And
butler's
you'll
pantry.
see it again then too.
So you have to date or wherever you are, what you should button in your bed and that will show up, and then whoever's down here behind the door, you can answer this and another and a fellow on the other.
All of these beautiful tiles imported from Tunisia. This is fantastic. And so, as I said, the Bach, Mr. Bach, was the vice president of Bethlehem Steel. That's where he had his money at his main house in outside of Pittsburgh. This was his winter home. Mr. Bach's office, though, this is nice. Although I don't know, I'd make my office a little more grand, but this is pretty neat. The Spanish revival style around the house is just beautiful. It's not a bad living room right here, is it? Beautiful. These fireplaces. So what do you think the vice president of Bethlehem Steel made in those days? Goodness. Obviously a pretty tidy salary to have a winter home like this.
That was his movie.
And there's 5 bedrooms upstairs.
Yes.
So this not being up there?
Yes, it will be a nice, beautiful power.
Everything is still in good.
So this is Mr. Buck's single bed that he slept in. His wife had already died 7 years before, so they had 9 children. But he was a widower by the time he built this place, so all he needed was just this small little bed here. Pretty modest. Just want you to see a little bit of what the exterior of El Retiro is. This is the winter home of Charles Austin Buck, vice president of Bethlehem Steel. So some people talking very loudly over here, but we'll walk by them quickly.
We're waiting to see our pay 150. So then, yeah, that actually
Yeah, this is like this is where they would have their dinner when the weather is nice, right? Yeah. So as I said, Bach has sort of an interesting upbringing. He came here when he was 6 years old from the Netherlands, and they moved to New York City, so he went to the Brooklyn public schools. And when he was a kid and a young man, he started writing letters to a lot of sort of famous and influential people. Among them, he didn't just write letters to these people, but he actually received responses too. He wrote letters to Frederick Douglass, Harriet Beecher Stowe, Mark Twain, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and he got replies from these people too. He wanted to write to them to find out essentially the secrets to their success. And he got letters in reply from all these people, which is sort of inspirational to him. And he saved all of these letters, and apparently they're now all in the Library of Congress. But in any event, he, as a young man, he worked as sort of an office boy, as it's described on the official website here of the place. He worked as an office boy for Western Union, and then he got a job in publishing. I think he worked for Henry Holt first in the advertising department, and then I think he later worked for Scribner. But he sort of began his early career as a publisher and as an editor and also an author. And then later he became the editor, I believe it was, a Brooklyn magazine. And that job led him to the one that he sort of became famous for. He got a job as the editor of Ladies' Home Journal. And he moved to Philadelphia. in a city where he became really famous for conservation and beautification efforts later on. But his time in Philadelphia as the editor of this Ladies' Home Journal was super important in his life. It became a very influential magazine. It was the first magazine in the world, supposedly, to have more than 1 million subscribers. And I'm just panning around here so you can get a little view of this place. There's lots of nice little trails. It's pretty crowded here on a Sunday, but in any event, this Ladies' Home Journal, it was an important magazine. He did actually publish a lot of articles. He wrote more than 20 articles from this magazine opposing women's suffrage and feminism in general. But also, perhaps more importantly, he built a sort of very lasting legacy. He really influenced construction of homes and architecture and design in the United States. I think Teddy Roosevelt said that he did more to influence architecture and home design in the U.S. than anyone else. And he did this by publishing plans, architectural plans, and people could, he published plans for houses, how to build and design houses from influential architects like Frank Lloyd Wright, for example, and others. So women got ideas of how they could build houses, and he popularized the bungalow. He also had very specific ideas about how how rooms should be designed. He didn't believe in, at the time, the idea of having a living room where you actually spent time was unheard of. There were parlors and drawing rooms, and those were sort of just rooms that people would only go to on ceremonial sort of occasions, maybe on Sundays or if they had company. And he believed in the concept of the living room, of having the nicest room of your house is the one that you actually spend time in, which was not the way things were done back in those days. So he was tremendously influential from that perspective. He also authored, I think it was 12 to 15 books, something like that, on his own. So he that was super important to him. And at the time, he would come down here to Florida. This is Central Florida. And he had a vacation home down here. In the early 1920s, I think it was 1922, he bought 14 acres of land on what was called Iron Mountain, which is a rare place, relatively high ground for Florida. You're looking at the Carillon here tower, by the way, too. But so in 1922, he buys 14 acres of land, and he hires Frederick Law Olmsted Jr., who was one of the most important landscape architects in American history. And of course, his father was he sort of was the pioneer, but the son was also equally ingenious. So he hires Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. with the mission to create this incredible place, which he was thinking to be sort of like a birder's paradise, like a birding and garden paradise. And he also wanted to build this incredible, what he called a singing tower, which this is a 205-foot tower here, Carillon Tower, that has 60 gigantic bells. And you're gonna hear those going off a little bit later here in the video. But so this was the vision. In the early 1920s, he started to build this place, and money was no object. He had plenty of money, and so he set about. It took about, I think it took 800 days to build this beautiful Carillon Tower, and the entire place was completed in 1929. And believe it or not, Calvin Coolidge, who was the president of the United States, actually came for the opening of this, as did the governor of Florida and other sort of luminaries. So this is a super big deal. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of these characters in a bit.
There we go. That's Joey.
So, this is the wife of the Mad Traveler, Jen Seminara. What do you think of this place, Jen?
I think the gardens are beautiful. It's really cool. We haven't been in the house yet.
Mm-hmm.
The music is not my favorite,
No?
but
Well, do you think he's just playing a bad tune today? Because it is a little sort of ominous or grating or something, right? It's not soothing. It's not relaxing, is it?
I don't know what the best kind of music for these bells would be.
What do you think they're going for here? What's the concept?
I don't know.
But do you like this place? Any tips for the viewers?
It's very relaxing and beautiful. Even on a crowded day. Today's pretty crowded. It's spring break time here in Florida.
We haven't eaten here yet, but there's a cafe
No.
too if you want to have lunch. Supposedly you saw right there, brunch too. Did it look good?
On Instagram I did. I didn't see what people were actually eating.
I just saw people eating chips and stuff like that. I assume there's more than that.
Yeah, probably.
By the way, what do you think about Edward Bach? I told you that he wasn't into women voting and such.
Not great.
No good?
I like the grounds and trying to leave a mark on the world and make it a prettier or better place. I like reading what he did at Niagara Falls.
Yeah. Focus on the positives,
But,
right? That's good.
yeah. Thinking that women really are not capable of voting and are their worst enemies, not crazy about that idea.
No good? All right.
No.
Anyways, cheers, guys. Thank you.